All right, we might have two of the biggest serial liars about the Russia-Ukraine war in American public life. This is Tucker Carlson and what's his name? Alex Jones. The big thing is Tucker Carlson flips on Trump, who wants to give Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine after realizing that Putin's a sociopath. Oh wait, the last 5 presidents have had to realize the same thing after starting off with a soft on Russia policy. It's almost like this is a pattern, but let's watch it.
The situation in Russia seems to be getting, between Russia and Ukraine and the United States and Europe, NATO, seems to be degrading quickly. Where is that going, do you think?
I like how he's like, the situation's degrading. It's like, what did you want? Is your ideal scenario that Putin just like rolled into Kiev and started occupying the place in 2 weeks like most military analysts thought would happen? Is that what you wanted? Like, he has no sympathy for Ukrainian sovereignty, for Ukrainian constitutionality, for the position Zelensky's in, because he's bound by this martial law. It's like, he has no sympathy for any of that. If this was America, then he would. There's no way his opinion would be this stupid. But actually, I'll just stop talking. Alex Jones has to answer.
It's an extreme escalatory phase, 3.5 plus years in. As you know, Trump says he's strongly considering giving them long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles. And Russia has said that escalates into direct war. And they're basically calling it World War IV. The CIA called the Cold War World War III. So we are really in with all the ingredients we have with China, the North Korean troops being in Ukraine, all the different proxy countries involved. This really is a new world war. The only question is,
what does China have to do with this? You know, people just like to lump China and Russia in together as if they're just like, you know, they're just happily cooperating in every single way. It's like, China is so different from Russia. It's crazy. You know, Russia is actually like involved militarily in so many global conflicts. China just sits back, waits for the conflict to end, and then like invests or does whatever it can to, you know, grow its export markets. Like, they do not care about Taiwan, you can say, but they're not an ultranationalist, super expansionist, like, expand my sphere of influence. The West is out to just like destroy us. No, it's like they're more free trade oriented. Russia very much is not. And they've absolutely let corruption take over their country, and Vladimir Putin has, in a way that has not crippled the state of China. That's why there's a wealth difference between the two.
Will it continue to escalate, which it is now. And in the next phase, we know that NATO has already been caught with Zelensky with Ukraine 2 years ago shooting missiles into Poland. They tried to blame on Russia. There's been those drones that they claim came out of Russia, but Russia says was basically a setup.
We don't know any of that. There was I think the Ukrainians missed like an interception once and it kind of flew backwards into Poland or something, but there's no evidence of a Ukrainian plot to shift blame on Russia. That's just pure propaganda, Russian state media, what this guy's hooked up to here.
Ago, you have Operation Spiderweb 3 months ago with smuggled drones as far as 4,000 miles away from Ukraine in Russia on its coast with Japan, with their Bear bombers being blown up, part of their nuclear triad.
Yeah, they're fighting a war. Like, what do you expect for them to be like nice about it or something? When the things Putin's done, have you researched the siege of Mariupol, or maybe the tens of thousands of Ukrainian children he's kidnapped? Like, they're trying to fight a war and deter the country that's invading them. Like, of course they're going to do like deep strikes into Russia.
That happened in America, and imagine if Russia had given Mexico the drones to do it. So all of this is NATO trying to suck the.
Imagine if we invaded Mexico. It's like, this is why I have to do a split screen, because the amount of stupid stuff he says is just rapid fire. Like your analogy completely leaves out the fact that if we invaded Mexico and Russia gave Mexico long-range missiles to bomb like DC, I would be all in favor of that. I would say go Russia and Mexico, because why the heck are we invading Mexico?
States directly into full conflict. They've got a 250,000-person army, conscription starting up in parts of Europe, a descendant of, quote, peacekeeping force to Ukraine, really calling an invasion force.
No. NATO has not mobilized any troops to Ukraine. They've explicitly said that they would not do so. Some NATO countries are militarizing, like Hungary. Some of them who are closer to Russia, they're definitely militarizing with NATO help. But NATO is not fighting a war with Russia directly with NATO troops. That is not that's just not factual. It's not like you cannot possibly come up with any source that says anything even remotely tangent to that.
A peacekeeping force. And then now, as I predicted, it was the next move. NATO claims that Russia is going into the zero phase or 0 hour, and that NATO's now putting out propaganda the last 48 hours that Russia has pre-positioned undercover Spetsnaz special forces all over Europe preparing terror attacks and mass casualty events, and that Russia is preparing to attack Europe proper, which, of course, is completely insane to do that offensively.
Hold on. Is this position that NATO is trying to drum up support to invade Russia? And when he says NATO, it's like NATO's a bunch of countries. NATO can't do anything without a consensus, right? So his whole opinion's nonsensical here. And I haven't seen, like, there are definitely, Russian agents throughout Europe. The Russian diaspora is huge. Most of those people actually fear Russia more so than they're working for them. But there's no such thing as like NATO saying that there's an imminent terrorist attack from Russia coming. Like I don't know where this guy gets any of his information. That would be headlines if that was occurring. According to the research I've done, NATO has not been drumming up all that, that kind of, that scale of you should be super scared of Russia. They've been focused on Ukraine. They haven't been saying Russia wants to take over Western Europe. Like, that's crazy. Putin wants the sphere of influence that the Soviets and the Russian Empire had. That does not include like Britain and France, right?
So that fits the pattern of the preparation for false flags that will then be blamed on Russia as the pretext to invoke the articles in NATO that brings NATO directly into war. And then if the United States is still part of NATO, that will drive.
Okay, so this is why we need political commentators to post collateral for if they're wrong. Because when Alex Jones posts his collateral and he sees that Article 5, which has only been invoked once, has not been invoked, and will probably never be invoked in our lifetimes, is not invoked in the next 5 years, he should have to pay large sums of money to the people that he misled. And I'll take the opposite side of that vote any day. I would probably bet 90-10 on a betting market. Well, adjusted for like the risk-free rate, it would be a little bit different. But it's like essentially free money. Article 5 is not going to be invoked. I'm almost sure of that. The only thing that could possibly invoke Article 5 is probably like fundamentalist Muslim terrorist organizations in the Middle East. Maybe that's the only thing I can think of, right? That's what triggered it the last time. So
directly into war with Russia that will quickly escalate into thermonuclear war in every major war game there is. That's why I agree with Elon Musk and Senator Lee that it's time for us to get out of NATO.
Immediately. If you take 3 steps back, so
immediately, it's like, are you that, like, do you not know what good alliances have done for, global conflict? Do you know how miserable before we had these large alliances, it was way worse. What do you think kept the Cold War cold? It was because everyone was allied with each other, and the Cold Wars happened for the most part around in more neutral countries. Right? If you have 2 big alliances, you're saying, oh, it's constantly World War III. If one country strikes another, then it's world. Yeah, that's the point. We don't want a bunch of unaffiliated countries just like floating around having civil wars with each other with no consequences. That's like a might equals right, Genghis Khan logic. It's like so immoral. Like, it sounds kind of good. Like, oh, if we get rid of the alliances. Alliances is one of the 4 reasons why World War I started. Isn't that what we learned in the history classes for the main reasons of the war? It's like, no. That's a reason a world war can happen, but not a reason. Not a reason to dissolve alliances. Alliances are very helpful.
Europe has no reason to fight Russia at all. Europe has every reason to cooperate with Russia, at least on energy, but on a lot of things, probably. It refuses. Russia's now formed an alliance, probably permanent, with China. And so, and Ukraine.
That's false. There's no written alliance there. It's mild economic cooperation. China hasn't even sent them weapons that we know of. They've only traded with them. They won't even overtly send them military goods. I say overtly because it could be happening through like a smuggling operation, but I doubt it.
Can't win. They don't have the manpower. They never could.
You don't know that. You would have, in the invasion in 2022, you would have said that they would have taken Kiev in 1 week. With NATO, they can have air superiority, but with Russia, Russia has more men, more troops, more tanks, but that oftentimes doesn't matter because the thing with Russia's army is that they're woefully incompetent. We saw that with one of the reasons that the Wagner Group rebelled, besides Putin kind of flipping the script on their contracts. They had complaints about the competency of how this war is being fought. It was a massive failure. Putin is going out to these rural areas and conscripting incompetent people. His whole structure is falling apart. It's what happens when you have a state run on corruption. You can't fight a war. A war is very technical. When you have the intelligence of all of NATO backing you, even if you don't have the foot soldiers or the tanks, you can still get a lot done. And Ukraine has a chance here, right? It's not over for Ukraine because the Russians have not done well. And if Ukraine gets the weapons they need to fight the war, then they could get much better terms. This is about negotiating an outcome. It's not about just like keeling over and having Putin, do it, whatever kind of genocide he wants to do to the Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian people. If he gets control of the whole area, like who knows what will happen then? No one knows because Putin's going to shut everything down.
So if you're escalating the war at this point, if you're promoting the war at this point, it seems to me your goal is to destroy Europe. And I think that's kind of always been the goal, to destroy Europe and the United States.
Well, as you stated,
I don't see by what avenue this expands to Europe. Like, in no way. It's just Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson have stupid definitions of world wars. Like, by their definition, the Israel-Palestine conflict is a world war because everyone has like vague, alliances, or at least people a side that they generally side with, and it's like, oh, the world is one part of the world's with Israel, one part of the world's with Palestine, so that must be a world war. And it's been going for 80 years. Like, that's not what a world war is. It's when you have every country actually mobilizing their entire economies to fight each other. And there has never been a world war in which every single country has done that, of course. But it's like half of them will say. That's our definition. Or at least the major ones. But it just comes from this stupid definition. And how is this destroying Europe? Like, how is advocating for Ukraine's right to exist, by the way, is what we're advocating for. Right to self-defense. If you can't say this is self-defense, then you're an idiot. People, like, it's two lines of reasoning. Countries have a right to self-defense. Ukraine is in a position where it must defend itself. Like, I don't see how you could be anti-war in this line of reasoning unless you just have no sympathy for other people's countries that they care about or cultures that they don't want to be wiped out of existence.
The United States since the 50s, right through Nixon, right through Reagan, right through Herbert Walker Bush, right until just the last 5 years or so, to split China from Russia.
Of course.
And that is a very good policy. And you have China that is actually expanding all over the South China Sea, just cut off 95% of rare earth minerals to the world, including the U.S.
That's also false. They did not cut off 95% of rare earth minerals. They simply flexed the idea that they could. They set up a regime to do so. I have a video on that.
Serious act of war, absolutely vital in everything we do. For folks that don't know, nothing works, cell phones, computers, avionics and aircraft, everything, satellites is based on those. That's another question. How is China allowed to position itself for 95% plus control of rare earth minerals? That's a serious act of war.
Okay, so what if you're so anti-war that Ukraine can't defend itself, and then you're like, China didn't cut off 95% of rare earth minerals, which they obviously didn't. If you looked into any of this, if they actually did that, the stock market would be down like 50%, because everything has rare earth minerals in, and China does have a massive presence there. So what do you want to do? Do you want to like have a United States military presence in the South China Sea then? You seem to be more pro-war than I am, if that's what you're advocating for.
So their expansion is taking islands, the Philippines, taking drilling rigs, off the coast of Vietnam. All that's happening. They just put a communist government or trying to fully in South Korea. So China is...
What? South Korea? I mean, the Democrat candidate won there, right? There is no Chinese Communist Party presence in South Korea. I don't know what he's talking about.
Move. And everything should be focused on them. It is a strategic blunder of biblical proportions to be roped into the Soros-NATO war. But NATO and the EU Unelected Commission has said for years that Europe's demographics and finances are the worst of any first world nation or sector. And so they say their business model is a 20 to 30-year war, conventional with Russia, that they believe will allow them to stay on a war economy and will finally break Russia, and then they will break Russia into 5 parts. That's official EU Commission policy. It's totally...
No, it's not. This is blowing my mind. Like, no, it's not. No Western country has proposed the partitioning of Russia. That is absurd. This is just like, it's making my brain fall out. Like, I don't understand. Nothing you could have, like, I followed this pretty closely. I know the positions of the EU on most of this. Germany, France, Britain, they all have a little bit different, like Slovakia, like they have different positions, but none of them even come close to this.
Russia's outproducing weapons 3-1, has 3 times the troops in the field and only gearing up.
Doesn't matter how many weapons you produce. If you don't have air superiority, then you might lose. NATO provides air. That's the main thing they provide. Russia can ramp up its hiring these incompetent people all they want, or build as many tanks as they want. It doesn't matter. The main thing in wars, if you believe war is a game of like intelligence, then it's exactly that. It's intelligence. Who cooperates intelligence wise with Ukraine? Like, duh. The people who have historically had the best intelligence performance. There's so much wrapped in with that, but in general, NATO's intelligence and its wartime analysis is much, much better than Russia's.
And so in the face of that delusional plan, similar to Napoleon's or Hitler's with Operation Barbarossa in 42, Europe is...
41? Barbarossa was 41, right? I don't know.
Double down again and sucking us in. But when all the real strategists and even all their think tanks say this wouldn't work, then the question is, why is the unelected commission and the U.S. neocons and left fully supporting this commitment to total
Because they
war?
want to destroy Christian civilization. That's why.
Yes,
That's why they got behind the First and Second World Wars, and it's why the lesson that they taught us in school was that it's dangerous to have a big white Christian country, which is not, actually. And they've systematically tried to destroy those countries, and they've succeeded.
And Russia is a very Christian nation, very pro-Western, and the left hates that. And so now they exactly, how do they turn over the chess?
I don't understand. Like, this is the level of stupidity that I can't comment on. Making, like, so Churchill's main concern was he didn't like Christians. Like, I'm just trying to think of an example. Stalin killed a bunch of Christians. That's true. He was a violent atheist. Stalin was. I just can't think, like, this is the country you're defending. I don't know how the United States has, sponsored the killing of Christians. It seems like all he cares about is Christians. That maybe says something about his ideology. and that his main goal is having a big white Christian country. Oh wait,
when the Hollywood satanic globalist BlackRock elite are failing is you kamikaze the Russians and America and Europe into a giant climactic war while the globalists sit back and watch us all kill each other.
That's totally right. I think that's totally right. Why are we participating in it? Why would the U.S. government ever send long-range missiles? Why would basically, if we send those munitions to Ukraine, we're at open war. We've been at war with Russia for 3.5 years, as you know, but
oh of course, but it's a Cold War. That's why it's better, right? So more military mobilization is generally worse. Now the other ingredient to a world war is you typically have to have countries that are expansionist, like without bounds, like they want to take over huge swaths, like multiple countries. I don't think just wanting to take over Ukraine is boundaries is like bounds to call this a world war. So you have to have like a Nazi Germany, etc. Just like or Germany in the 1918s, right? 1990s. That all counts. But unless Russia is mobilizing to reconstitute the Russian Empire and all of the West mobilizes against that, then I would say that's a world war. It's a subjective phrase.
to be open war. Why would we go along with that? What is going on?
It's sleepwalking into Armageddon. Well, Europe's demographics and financial system means the unelected EU will collapse in the next few years. It's politically unpopular, so
he needs to post collateral for that as well. He's probably he like Sandy Hook might have made him. I actually haven't followed up on that, but this guy deserves to lose a lot of money for all the stuff he says.
Reason is they believe a war will keep them in power, and it's delusional. That's the last refuge of tyrants when they're falling is to take the country to war to try to maintain domestic control. But again, at a spiritual level, it's absolute Satanism.
Like, do you know what a wartime economy is? Like, it's 10, 15, 20+% GDP spent on war, on war or military. Trump, by begging them, got them like barely up to like 5%. And when they were at like 2%. If this is their big plan, this like war economy to like vaguely out war economy Russia, so one day Russia just gives up and says, oh, I just give up and you can partition me into 5 parts.
It's absolute death cult, death wish that if the globalists can't maintain control, they'll just drag us into the grave of history with themselves. And like so many tyrannies, they are going like the elephant graveyard or boneyard to Russia to die.
Why would the U.S. government continue to recognize Zelensky, who's an unelected dictator who's worked for...
Does he know that Zelensky was elected? Either he doesn't know Zelensky's elected, he doesn't know what martial law in Ukraine constitutes as far as elections go, or he's just like, he was born like yesterday. I don't know. I can't explain this stuff.
Years to destroy Christianity in Ukraine, which is a Christian country and has always been.
No, I mean, there was some churches in Ukraine. He made the churches in Ukraine like sever their ties from Moscow. That was all he did. And of course, this is all like turbulent. You can say like he went too far with this specific church. They didn't really have ties with Moscow. Who cares? It's like he didn't make a law against Christians. He didn't like set a like state religion against Christianity or something. It's stupid.
He be invited to the White House this week? I don't understand. When he does not have a Democratic mandate. He's not an elected leader. He's a murderer. They've sold him.
Here's the thing. In war times, democracy is not the highest good. Because if the people just want to give up the war and just like every man for themselves, that's not in the best interest of stability and of the country, of the sovereign. So typically you'd fight a war even if when it's unpopular. If it's for self-defense. Because maintaining the integrity of the nation is, in my opinion, the best end good, right? You shouldn't just fold to invading nations. It's probably a bad idea. Now, Tucker would argue it's a good idea. As like Putin's probably going to be, he probably thinks Putin's going to be nicer to Christians when he occupies Kiev, because that's Tucker Carlson's dream outcome.
Weapons to some of the worst terror groups in the world, and we're treating him like he's a head of state. Like, why are we doing that?
And just a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, he was back at the White House, and Trump then posted Truth Social. And I love Trump overall, but Trump started doing a 180 from saying we need to get out of this to saying, well, we're out of it, but we'll sell whatever weapons to Europe you want. And I feel like Ukraine's going to win and maybe not just get back its territory, but get more territory, meaning Russia, which is an extremely provocative and escalatory statement to Russia. And we know that Putin agreed actually to the...
No, since 2014, they haven't really had... Well, the separatists gained like a third of the Donbass pretty quickly. They have never gotten that back, so it would be still their territory. Even if they went into Crimea, it would still be their territory by anyone's accounting. I mean, and how can Tucker Carlson, with a straight face, like he knows Stalin killed many Christians. Putin puts up statues of Stalin. How can you have more sympathy for this guy than Zelensky, who has done nothing but had a normal wartime, suppression of free speech, insofar as your church can't coordinate directly with Moscow? It's like, okay.
Of what Trump wanted, but Zelensky and NATO have refused. And so we have to ask the calculus of why the president, who's Mr. Peace Prize, has done a great job helping in 7 other conflicts, which I totally support. Why is he suddenly changing course? Tucker, you know a lot better than I do.
So did you know that before the current generation, chips and fries were cooked in natural fats like beef tallow? That's how things used to be done, and that's why people looked a little slimmer at the time and ate better than they do now. Well, Masa Chips is bringing that all back. By the way, I've tried to interview him like 20 times. He refused to do an interview with me, but he fixation on the attraction to Zelensky. Why does our foreign eat them all? And we eat a lot. Why the attraction to Zelensky? Why does our foreign policy class or donor class have this fixation on Zelensky? He's a hero. By the way, I've tried to interview him like 20 times. He refused to do an interview with me, but he's everywhere in the United States, basically American.
Yeah, you've called him a murderer. Why would he accept an interview with someone who thinks he murdered someone? Like, there was that journalist who died in a Ukrainian prison, and all of a sudden, Zelensky's a murderer. No evidence, no anything, he's just a murderer. Like, why would you accept an interview with that guy who thinks that?
Point. What's the appeal there?
I think it's the money laundering appeal and the fact that that's where most of the money laundering's still able to go on since Trump and Doge and Elon shut down a lot of the graft and USAID and the EPA and Department of Energy, that clearly that is a place where they can launder money and where they can, go over there and be like rock stars in Kiev and have all the prostitutes and the rest of it. Reportedly, it's Sodom and Gomorrah over there. The women, are just partying while the men, boys and old men go off to die. It's a very...
I'm Sora 2, the new AI in town.
We're not afraid. Artless guy.
Very sick situation, and just the height of decadence. We've heard the quote of Marie Antoinette, which they never proved she said it, where they're about to storm the Bastille at the start of the French Revolution. And they say the peasants are all starving. They're begging for grain. They're begging for wheat. And she says, let them eat cake. And then you saw what happened. Well, this is literally let them eat cake while our country's infrastructure falls apart, while millions die from fentanyl, while crime is rampant in the streets. We have all this money being sent over to Ukraine. And look, I don't like sending money to
Millions. I'm sorry. I think overdose deaths are like 6 figures, maybe. Majority of fentanyl. I don't know where this guy gets his numbers. I want to hear them talk about World War II a little bit here.
Point. I just want to say Hitler was a total piece of shit, actually, and destroyed Europe. And why would you ever be for Hitler? I don't really get it, but by the way, we should not have armed Stalin. We were not. That was totally evil.
If you had to say Stalin for total kills of people was worse than Hitler.
Of course, obviously, but
that's great and fun, but if you don't do any Lend-Lease, then what if the Nazis take control of the Soviet Union? Then you have a bigger problem. More dead Jews, more purging, Stalin 2.0, but it's Hitler instead of Stalin. You don't, and Hitler's not gonna be nice to you. He's going to try and take all of Europe. Like you don't want the expansion to go that far, and it doesn't matter who you have to fund. And the purges that Stalin did were not dependent on Western aid. They're relatively resource efficient, right? It's just an innocent civilian or a unarmed civilian. Purging them is very easy. Fighting a war is not easy. That's millions of times more resource intensive there. So that's why Lend-Lease did not kill Christians. That's stupid.